right? Last week or previously, we have already discussed the first module, which is all about the Rizal Law. So, na-discuss na natin kung ano-ano yung mga challenges na hinarap ng Rizal Law when it was still in Congress, and also kung ano-ano yung mga contents ng batas. Excuse me. So today, pag-uusapan naman natin ang theory of nationalism. So ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng nationalism? Ano bang ibig sabihin ng patriotism, ng voluntarism? Excuse me, kasi maraming commercial. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng theory of nationalism, patriotism, voluntarism, at ano ba ang pinagkaiba ng nation at saka ng isang state? Okay, so let's see. Ano ba ang kaibahan ng patriotism at ng nationalism? So actually this term, no, minsan na-interchange natin siya in terms of its meaning, pero actually meron silang distinct definition, but both terms are referring to love of country. Okay? Basically, si patriotism, siya tong love of country. Love of country because he is a citizen of that country. Basic as that. Mahal ko ang bansa ko dahil taga dito ako or taga Pilipinas ako kaya mahal ko ang Pilipinas. So ganun ka plain ang concept of what is patriotism. Si nationalism naman is the love of country because of that feeling na member siya ng community na yon, because of culture, shared history, shared what do you call this one? Physical appearance. It's more on the cultural aspect. That's why this love of country ay gusto niya maipakita. And that's nationalism. Okay? Patriotism and nationalism, these are two distinct terminologies of referring to love of country, but these terms are very powerful if talagang ma-inculcate siya sa isip ng isang tao, lalo na sa isang Pilipino. And aside from these two concepts, gusto rin natin na ma-identify kung ano nga ba ang voluntarism. Later on, as we go on with our entire subject, mas maiintindihan natin anong relationship ni voluntarism kay Rizal. So the very basic of what is voluntarism, we have this during your, what they call this one, NSTP2, diba? The very concept of voluntarism is helping others without waiting for something in return. So that's a very basic of what is voluntarism. And usually, yung mga taong involved in volunteer act or yung mga volunteers na tinatawag natin, they are actually acting on certain matters because they think that merong need for someone to act on a certain situation. That's why they volunteered for it. Okay? So later on, malaman natin anong relationship niyan with Rizal. So balikan natin yung concept ng nationalism at ng patriotism, especially nationalism. So mas maiintindihan natin sila if we can identify the separate distinction of what is a nation and a state. Okay? These terms, nation and state, actually they are both referring to a country, okay? Pero meron silang kaibahan. Okay? Meron sa pagkaiba. Okay? The first difference, the elements of the state and nation are different. So ano nga ba ang element of the state? So we have four elements of the state. We have territory, people, government, and sovereignty. These elements, the four elements of the state, lahat nito, it's consistent. In the absence of even one element, the state cannot exist anymore. Okay? A state is always characterized by all these four elements, while a nation, this one, while a nation, it's cultural in nature. Meron siyang mga elements. It's also possible that the elements of the state can also be the elements of a nation. But the thing is, hindi consistent ang element of this nation. Why? Because nation, again, is anchored to the concept of culture. yung kultura ang bumubuo kung bakit naiisip ng isang community of people that they belong to one nation. Whereas state, it's a political concept. Okay? It's a political concept, especially it is being devolved o naging result siya by government and sovereignty. That's why these elements of the state, it has to be consistent and present at all times because without these elements, a state cannot exist. Okay? Nation can exist with even without territory. A nation can even exist without a government, and a nation can even exist without sovereignty. Of course, both state and nation cannot exist without its people. Kasi yun ang isa sa pinaka-factor kung bakit sila andyan, yung tao. Especially si nation. Okay? Next. State, again, gaya ng sabi ko, the state is a political organization, while nation is a social, cultural, psychological, emotional, and what they call this one, political unity. So the state is a political organization since they fulfill the security and welfare needs of its people. Okay? It is concerned with the human actions, and at the same time, it is a kumbaga, legal entity. On the other hand, nation is being united by its population, which is full of emotions, spiritual and psychological bonds. Diba? A nation has little to do with the physical needs of the people. Eh. Kasi nga, again, what bonds the people of a certain nation is their emotional unity or yung bond with their culture. The state is being bonded by its legal sense or yung pagiging legal entity niya. Okay? Next. Nation-state difference. Possession of a definite territory is essential for the state but not for a nation. Okay? It is essential for each state to possess a fixed territory because these territories, these are the physical elements of the state. Okay? State, ito yung pinaka-physical representation. I mean, territory is a physical representation of a state. Okay? But for a nation, territory is not an essential requirement. Okay? A nation can actually survive even without a fixed territory. As long as the people belong to that community, they can, kumbaga, they can feel that they're connected with their culture. Okay? Kahit sabihin natin magkakahiwalay-hiwalay pa yan. Kahit yung mga Filipinos, as long as we feel that we belong to what they call this one, to a community of people with shared culture and history or whatever, as long as we feel that we are one, we can even exist kahit nakadispersa sa tibok kalibutan. Maskin wala ka diri tanan sa Philippines, the Filipino nation can still exist because there is that group of people believing that we have that sense of unity because of our shared characteristics or what. Okay? But for a state, it has it needs to have a territory for it to exist. Okay? Again, because territory is one of the four essential elements. So mawala siya dito, like territory, dili siya ka-exist. That's the state. And the next one. There can be two or more nationalities living in one state. Okay, tawag niyan, it is possible that in a state, there can be two nationalities or more. Like for example, in the US. Okay, again, because the concept of a nation and nationality is based on culture. Okay, in the U.S., for example, the entire United States of America, that republic, that state, that political entity is a state. Okay, yung mga tao doon living in the United States of America, they compose of several nationalities. You have Filipino nationals, you have Mexican nationals, you have whatever national you can name it, meron doon. So for uh, it is possible to have multiple nationalities in one state. But again, yun naman yung kaibahan ni nationality or ni nation. There can be no other nationality in one nation. There's only one nationality in one nation. Again, kasi nga, in a nation, they are all bonded with their cultural background, their physical characteristics, and other things that they feel that they're united. So yun yung nagbaband sa kanila. That's why they feel that they belong to each other. So A nation is a group of people with singular identity, yung gano'n, cultural identity. So, imposible na mahaluan sila ng another nationality because that another nationality is, I mean, they belong to another type or another group of nation or another nation. So, hindi pwedeng may dalawang nation in one nation. Okay? But it is possible to have multiple nations or nationalities in one state. Okay? Ano bang pinagkaiba sir ng nationality sa nation? Nationality is or the people of a nation. Yan, mga tao yung nationality. A nation is the concept of yun yung concept of community, yung lugar. Okay, not necessarily in one area. Okay, but that's the sense of community, yung nation. Okay? The nation is more stable than a state. Yes, because again, hindi kasi basta-bastang nawawala ang pagiging isang nation unless papatayin mo lahat ng taong belong to that community. A state can lost its entity once one of its element are being kumbaga compromised. Like for example, during after World War II, okay, natalo yung Germany and Japan. And one of the consequences is they have to be intervened by the allied powers. So may foreign intervention na, may US intervention sa Japan, mayroong intervention din ng US sa Germany and France, meron din doon. So uh, kumbaga they are being controlled by other people, by other countries rather. A state cannot exist with that situation because again one of the elements of the state is sovereignty. Sovereignty means independence. So if other countries are controlling or intervening to another state, therefore its sovereignty is being compromised. Therefore nawawala na yung sense of kanyang sovereignty or independence, therefore the state cannot exist anymore. Okay, so just like what happened with Japan and Germany after World War II, since there is an intervention of other state to this state, Germany and Japan, nawala na yung kanilang sovereignty. Therefore, the German state and the Japanese state cannot exist anymore. But again, nation is very different. It can exist even though may foreign intervention. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kahit may intervention yung US at yung ibang bansa sa Japan at Germany, at kahit nawala na yung pagiging state ng Japan at Germany, the German nation and the Japanese nation are still existing because the people in this area, okay, thinking that they belong to this Japanese culture, the Japanese identity, they can still feel that they are united with this characteristic. They can still exist as a nation, though may intervention of foreign people. Okay, so mas stable si nation kanya regardless of the situation, as long as they feel that they are connected with one another, bahalag may foreign intervention sa ilang country, it can still exist. Okay? Pero ang state, it's quite unstable because once one of the elements are being compromised, nawawala na yung sense niya of being a state. Okay? And the next one. A state can be created, while a nation is always the result of an evolution. A state can be created by legal entity, no, by law. Pwede siyang magawa by agreement. Like for example, the state of South Sudan or the Republic of South Sudan. South Sudan is, I guess, the youngest country in the world. I think they became independent in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. 2010. Yung South Sudan was a former territory or part of the Sudan Republic. So, nung nagkaroon ng independence, nagkaroon na ng agreement na okay, hanggang dito lang yung territory ng South Sudan at ito yung magiging structure mo. So after the discussion and the arrangements, after it was signed, yung agreement nila, therefore, the state of Sudan was created. Okay? Or even the Philippine Republic. After we gained independence from the US and we crafted our own constitution, By the power of the Constitution, we declared ourselves as an independent state. Therefore, we created the Philippine Independent State. Independent state. So a state can actually be created by legal documentation, whereas a nation is a result of evolution. It's a culture, ba? Matagal nabubuo yung idea o character ng isang kultura. Ganon din ng isang nation, since the culture is a very characteristic of a nation. So it's an evolution. So hindi basta-bastang nagagawa ang isang nation. It's the result of an evolution, acquisition of different characteristics, mga ways, okay, yung mga customs na very distinct lang sa kanilang nation. So it's an entire evolution. It took them some time before they were able to craft their own nation by their own culture. So a nation cannot be created just like how a state can be created. Then we have here the state uses police power or force for preserving its unity and integrity, while the nation is bound by strong cultural and historical links. Okay, so one of the eminent powers of the state, okay, yung mga natural na kapangyarihan ng isang estado, meron tayong eminent power na police force, police power rather, then eminent domain and the power of taxation. These are the basic elements or basic powers of the state. So isa doon is the police power. Si police power is yung kapangyarihan ng estado to control if there are some chaos or kanang disturbances within its territory. So they have to exert some power or force through its authorities like the military or the police force in order to control a situation. Okay? But for a nation, hindi na kailangan ng isang military force o ng police power to control uh, the nation. Just the people trying to go against the culture by the judgment of the community, it's already enough for the people to be controlled. Diba kasi ayaw na ayaw ng tao na ma-judge sila. Diba? Iniiwasan yan ng tao. Lalo na ng mga Filipino kasi conservative tayo na kultura. So ayaw na ayaw nating ma-judge ng ating community. So para hindi tayo ma-judge as long as we follow the culture, the norms of this nation, we're not being judged. So we're good. Pero pag we go against that culture, tataas yung kilay ng community, i-judge ka nila, malulugmok ka, malulungkot ka. So para hindi ka na malungkot, susunod ka na lang doon sa kung ano yung kaugalian. So hindi na nila kailangan ng police power because the culture itself that unites everyone is already enough for you na magtarong ka. Ingana. Very powerful si culture eh. Okay. Saan na ba tayo? Meron namang concept si Benedict Anderson of what is a nation. Okay? In relation to the concept of nationalism. Sabi ni Benedict Anderson kasi yung concept of nationalism is para siyang ideology. No, ideology like democracy, like communism, diba? These are concepts, no? Nationalism is also the same thing. But the difference is nationalism is so powerful that it can create a community. Diba? Because of that sense of unity, that sense of kanang similar characteristic, it creates a community which becomes the nation. That's why sinasabi ni Benedict Anderson, itong nation na ito na nabuo ng sense of nationalism is actually an imagined community. Bakit siya imagined community? Kasi itong mga taong ito, like for example, the Filipino nation, not the Philippine state, the Filipino nation, nabuo tayo by our own culture, by our own identity. We can feel that we have this sense of unity kahit hindi natin nakakita at nakakausap yung ibang Pilipino around the Philippines, kahit hindi pa tayo nakikita, hindi pa tayo nakakausap, or kahit siguro kanang nagkasugata pa, but still, we feel that we belong to each other and we protect each other because we feel that we belong to this community, not necessarily that we are in the Philippines or in a single territory, but that we belong in a certain group. Diba? We are ready to die for it. Nga na. So that's an imagined community that's very powerful, sabi ni Benedict Anderson. But sabi niya, ni Benedict Anderson, this imagined community is limited. Okay? Kasi kahit gaano pa kalaki yung isang bansa like Russia, okay, that nation is being limited by its borders within their scope. So itong imagined community natin is actually very limited regardless of the size of your land territory. Kasi meron tayong borders. At minsan, yung hangganan ng ating borders, hanggang dun lang din yung borders ng ating, minsan ng ating scope of nation. Pero minsan lumalabas tayo eh. Pero hindi na natin, tawag niyan, hindi na natin sakop yung, I mean, tawag niyan na kahit nasa labas na yung ibang Filipino, for example, member pa din sila ng community. But yung physical representation of the territory, yun, that's being limited. Okay, that's why imagine community daw ang isang nation. Then we have here, sovereign. Okay, this imagined community is very powerful because it is sovereign. Ibig sabihin, a nation can become a state and they can create their own government. Very powerful. But this idea that we belong in one community, that we belong in one group, that we feel the way they feel in terms of relationship, it's very powerful kasi it can create a state later on. It can create a structure, it can create a government. So this imagined community, kahit nation siya, can also become sovereign or a state. Lastly, ayan, this imagined community is imagined or is powerful. And itong imagined community natin is a sense of community. It's very powerful. Kasi nga kahit hindi pa tayo nakikita sa isa't isa, tayo nagkakasalamuha, but still we feel that sense of family. Di ba? We are all Filipinos from Luzon down to Mindanao. Di ba? That's very powerful. Paano mo mako-collect at mako-connect itong mga taong ito from Luzon down to Mindanao, 'di ba? It's very powerful at nagko-connect sa atin is yung ating sense of nationality or yung nationalism natin. And that's very powerful because it creates community. Okay? That's how powerful nationalism is. Okay? So much about it. So for your task this week, I want you to read 02 Handout 1. Yan, it is all about the imagined community of Benedict Anderson and other readings. So basahin nyo yan. And also later on, 02 Quiz 1 will be available. So check nyo lang yung MC nyo. Kasi gusto ko lang tapusin din lahat ng aking result subject or session so that I could release the quiz. So check nyo lang by the weekend yung 02 Quiz 1 on ELMS. Okay?